At our family Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law whispered that she was pregnant with my husband's baby, confident no one would believe my word against hers. She thought she had just secured my fortune and my husband, and that her victory was complete. I simply smiled and said, "Congratulations." She had no idea that the beautifully wrapped gift I had for her under the tree contained a single 20-year-old piece of paper that would make her face turn pale. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Dr. Simone Davenport, and my life's work is the study of the human mind. As a child psychologist in Atlanta, I have spent 3 decades listening to the discordant melodies of family life, diagnosing the hidden fractures beneath the polished surfaces of holiday newsletters and smiling family portraits. I am an expert in the art of observation, a skill that has made me one of the most sought-after practitioners in my field. It is also a skill that has, for the past year, turned my own beautiful home into a clinical case study. Tonight is our annual Christmas Eve dinner, an event that is a fixture in the Buckhead social calendar. Our mansion is a symphony of festive elegance. A 20-foot fir tree, professionally decorated, glitters in the grand foyer. The air is thick with the scent of pine, roasting duck, and the expensive perfume of our guests. From the outside, we are the picture of dynastic success. The brilliant doctor, the charming husband, the handsome son and his beautiful wife. But from my vantage point at the head of the long damask-covered dining table, I see the hairline cracks in the facade. I see the sickness. I watch my husband, Marcus, a man who, at 60, still possesses the easy, predatory charm that once captivated me. He is holding court at the far end of the table, telling a story to a rapt audience. But his eyes, I note, keep flicking towards our daughter-in-law, Kayla. They share a glance, a flicker of shared secret so brief it is almost imperceptible. But I am a trained observer. I see it. I watch Kayla, my son Michael's wife of 3 years. She is 28, a vision in a crimson dress, her laughter a little too loud, her smile a little too bright. She touches Marcus's arm as she passes his chair, a gesture that lasts a fraction of a second too long, a gesture of possessiveness disguised as affection. She is a social media manager, a profession that seems to consist of curating an illusion of a perfect life. Her own, and now it seems she is attempting to co-opt mine. I have been observing these small, furtive gestures for months. The late-night text messages Marcus receives that make him smile. The sudden shared errands that he and Kayla seem to have. The way they stand just a little too close together in a crowded room. Each one is a data point, a symptom. And my diagnosis, arrived at with the cold, dispassionate clarity of a clinician, is as devastating as it is certain. My husband is having an affair with my son's wife. The sickness is not just in my marriage. It is a cancer that has metastasized, threatening to consume our entire family. Tonight, I suspect the disease will present its most acute and undeniable symptom. And I, the doctor, will be ready. The grand, beautiful house in which we sit, the very stage for their sordid little drama, was purchased with the proceeds from my first book, a national bestseller on childhood anxiety. The European cars in the 5-car garage, the private school education that launched our son Michael into a successful career as an architect, the very clothes on my husband's back. All of it has been funded by the relentless, all-consuming engine of my career. I am the architect and the sole financier of this gilded cage. Marcus, my husband, has not worked in the traditional sense for 15 years. He was a corporate lawyer when we met, a man of ambition and drive. But as my practice flourished, as my reputation grew, his own ambition seemed to atrophy. He retired early at 45 to manage the family investments. This grand title is a euphemism for a life of leisure. He plays golf at the Peachtree Golf Club. He sits on the boards of fashionable charities, a position that requires his attendance at glamorous luncheons. He is the handsome, charming consort to the brilliant Dr. Davenport. He is a man who has grown accustomed to a life of immense privilege, a life he has not earned, but one he has come to see as his birthright. Kayla entered our lives like a heat-seeking missile, targeting the wealth and status our family represented. She met Michael at a charity event, one of the very events Marcus had helped to organize. She was beautiful, ambitious, and possessed a chameleon-like ability to reflect the desires of those around her. She charmed Michael, who is a kind, steady and somewhat naive man, with her seeming adoration. She charmed Marcus with her flattery and her wide-eyed admiration for his business acumen. He did not charm me. I saw from the very beginning the hard, calculating ambition in her eyes. I saw the way she assessed our home not as a place of family, but as a collection of assets. She was a woman who was marrying not just a man but a lifestyle. And she has spent the last 3 years enjoying the fruits of that lifestyle with a voracious, insatiable appetite. The shopping sprees at Phipps Plaza, the luxury vacations, the constant expensive redecorating of the beautiful home I bought for her and Michael. All of it has been a testament to her belief that she has finally truly arrived. They are both, my husband and my daughter-in-law, deeply dependent on me. They are beautiful, decorative plants, living in a climate-controlled greenhouse that I alone maintain. But in their shared parasitic existence, they have deluded themselves into believing they are the gardeners. Their affair, I diagnose, is not just one of passion. It is a business merger. It is a hostile takeover attempt. They believe that together they can usurp my position, that they can wrest control of the fortune I have built. They see me as the obstacle, the aging queen to be deposed. They have fatally underestimated the one crucial fact of their existence. The queen is not just the monarch. She is the entire kingdom. And she is about to issue a decree of exile. The one pure, untainted thing in this gilded cage is my son. Michael is the light of my life, the reason I have tolerated this slow-motion decay for so long. He is a good man, a man of substance and integrity, a man who, in a cruel twist of genetic irony, has inherited all of his mother's empathy and none of his father's predatory charm. He sits beside me at the table now, his face a picture of uncomplicated happiness. He is celebrating his 29th birthday tonight, and he is surrounded, he believes, by the people who love him most. He is a successful architect with a boutique firm that is beginning to make a name for itself. A success he has achieved through his own talent and hard work, though I know the seed money for me was the foundation upon which he built it. He leans over to me, his voice a low, warm murmur under the din of the party. "You outdid yourself this year, Mom," he says, gesturing to the beautifully decorated room. "Everything is perfect." "You deserve it, honey," I say, placing my hand on his. His hand is warm and strong, the hand of a builder, a creator. He looks across the table at his wife, Kayla, and his expression softens with a love so genuine and so profound it is a physical pain to witness. "Isn't she beautiful tonight?" he whispers to me. "She is," I reply, my voice even, betraying nothing of the cold, hard knot in my stomach. He is completely, blissfully and tragically unaware. He does not see the secret, shared smiles between his wife and his father. He does not notice the way Kayla's knee brushes against Marcus's under the table. He sees only what he wants to see. A happy family, a beautiful wife, a loving father. His goodness is a shield, but it is also a blindfold. The depth of their betrayal is measured not just in their actions but in their choice of victim. They are not just betraying me, they are betraying him. They are taking his pure, unqualified love and using it as a cover for their sordid, selfish affair. They are building their secret world in the heart of his, like a cuckoo laying its egg in another bird's nest. And when the truth finally hatches, it will destroy everything he holds dear. My primary struggle over these past few months of quiet observation has not been with my own anger or grief. It has been with the question of how to protect him. How do I excise the cancer without killing the patient? How do I expose the liars without shattering the man who loves them? I have concluded that a slow, painful revelation would be the cruelest cut of all. The only path forward is a single, swift, and surgically precise incision. The truth must be revealed in its entirety in a single, undeniable moment. It will be a trauma, a shock to his system. But he is strong. He has a good heart. And I, his mother, will be there to help him heal, to help him rebuild after the controlled demolition I am about to initiate. I look at him now, my beautiful, unknowing son, and I feel a surge of protective love so fierce it is almost a physical force. They have mistaken my composure for weakness, my silence for ignorance. They have no idea that the quiet, elegant woman sitting beside them is not a victim. She is a mother bear, and they have just made the fatal mistake of threatening her cub. The moment came as I knew it would, not in the bright public glare of the dinner table, but in the quiet, shadowed intimacy of the parlor. Dinner was over. Our guests, about 30 of our closest friends and family, were mingling, their laughter and conversation a pleasant, festive hum. Marcus was holding court by the fireplace, a glass of vintage port in his hand. Michael was deep in conversation with his uncle about a new building project. I was standing near the grand, glittering Christmas tree, accepting a compliment on the decor from a neighbor. I saw Kayla detach herself from a group and begin to move towards me. Her movements were fluid and purposeful, the movements of a predator closing in on its prey. She had a glass of champagne in her hand and a small secret smile on her lips. This was it. The moment of the presenting symptom. She came to stand beside me, so close that the scent of her perfume, the same cloyingly sweet scent I had been smelling on my husband's suits for months, was overpowering. "Simone," she said, her voice a low, intimate purr. "The party is just fabulous. You have such a gift for these things." "Thank you, Kayla," I replied, my own voice cool and polite. She took a small sip of her champagne, her eyes scanning the room, a queen surveying her soon-to-be conquered territory. "You know," she continued, her voice dropping even lower, becoming a conspiratorial whisper meant only for me. "It's so important to have these big family moments, to celebrate new beginnings." I simply waited, my expression unreadable. She turned to me then, her eyes, which I had once thought were merely ambitious, now shining with a hard, cruel and triumphant light. She leaned in close, her lips almost touching my ear. The whisper, when it came, was a drop of pure, distilled poison. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby," she breathed, the words a hot, foul vapor against my skin. "And when I tell Michael, no one will believe you when you try to deny it." The words hung in the air between us, a declaration of total war. It was a statement of such breathtaking, audacious cruelty that for a single solitary second, the world seemed to stop. It was a perfect, multifaceted attack. It was not just the confession of the affair, of the pregnancy. It was the strategic masterstroke that followed. "No one will believe you." She had anticipated my every move. She knew that my word, the word of the older soon-to-be ex-wife, would be pitted against hers, the young, fertile, grieving widow of a beloved son. She was not just telling me she was pregnant. She was telling me she had already won the narrative. She would paint me as a liar, a hysterical, jealous woman trying to tarnish the memory of her dead husband and the legitimacy of his unborn child. She was going to use my son's love for her as a weapon to destroy my credibility. She believed she had me trapped. She had constructed what she thought was the perfect, inescapable checkmate. She would have the baby, she would have my son's devotion, and she would have my husband's, and by extension my fortune. I would be left with nothing. An outcast, a liar, a madwoman. She pulled back, her face a mask of smug, victorious satisfaction. She was waiting for my reaction. She was expecting me to crumble, to gasp, to cry, to cause a scene that would only serve to prove her point about my instability. She was waiting for the queen to abdicate her throne. In the ringing silence that followed her whisper, I did not crumble. The psychologist in me, the part of my brain that is a cool, detached observer of human pathology, took complete control. I saw Kayla not as a monster but as a case study. This was a textbook example of narcissistic personality disorder, a classic power play designed to provoke an emotional reaction, to create chaos, to seize control of the narrative through sheer, audacious aggression. To react emotionally would be to fall into her trap. To react clinically would be to disarm her completely. So I did not gasp. I did not cry. I did not even allow a flicker of the Arctic rage that was solidifying in my veins to show on my face. Instead, I held her gaze, my own eyes calm and steady. And I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a forgiving smile. It was a thin, small, and deeply unsettling smile of a doctor who has just received the final confirming lab result on a particularly interesting, if predictable, disease. It was a smile that said, "Ah, yes. Just as I suspected." My composure, my utter lack of the expected emotional meltdown, was a splash of ice water on her triumphant moment. A flicker of confusion, of uncertainty, crossed her face. This was not the reaction she had planned for. I let the silence stretch for a beat longer, enjoying her momentary disorientation. Then I spoke. My voice was not a whisper. It was quiet, but it was clear, calm, and carried the unmistakable weight of absolute authority. "Congratulations, Kayla," I said, my smile never wavering. "What wonderful news for the family." I then took a small, deliberate sip of my own champagne, my eyes never leaving hers. My reaction was a complete and total refutation of her power. I had not accepted her premise. I had not engaged in her drama. I had simply received her information as one might receive a piece of interesting, if slightly distasteful, news. I had treated her devastating, life-altering announcement as a minor social pleasantry. Her smug confidence began to visibly unravel. She had come to me with a nuclear bomb and I had treated it like a firecracker. That's all you have to say?" she stammered, her voice losing its silky conspiratorial tone. "What more is there to say?" I replied, my voice still pleasant. "You've given me some news. I've offered my congratulations. It seems our conversation is complete." I then turned my body slightly, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of dismissal, and caught the eye of a passing guest. "Eleanor, darling," I said, my voice now warm and engaging. "You must tell me about your trip to Morocco. The photos you posted were absolutely breathtaking." I had turned away from her. I had dismissed her. I had rendered her and her life-destroying secret completely and utterly irrelevant. She was left standing there alone by the Christmas tree, her great weapon having misfired, her grand moment of triumph having fizzled into a confusing anticlimactic fizzle. I saw her, out of the corner of my eye, turn and walk away, her back stiff, her confident glide now a rigid, uncertain march. She had played her trump card, and it had been met with a quiet, smiling and deeply unnerving indifference. She had no way of knowing that my indifference was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of a much, much stronger hand. She thought she had just declared checkmate. She had no idea she had just, with her own words, tipped over her king and conceded the entire game. The reason for my composure, the source of my quiet, unshakable confidence, was not a matter of psychological fortitude. It was a matter of biological fact. A fact that was known to only two people in the world. Me and my husband, Marcus. A fact that was documented, certified, and locked away in a fireproof safe in the back of my home office. The secret was this. 20 years ago, Marcus Davenport had a vasectomy. The memory of it was as clear and vivid as if it were yesterday. Michael was 9 years old. He had just gone through a particularly challenging phase. A bout of childhood asthma that had resulted in several terrifying late-night trips to the emergency room. Marcus had not handled the stress well. He was a man who enjoyed the pleasant, performative aspects of fatherhood. The school plays, the baseball games, the proud introductions to his business associates. He was not, however, well suited to the messy, terrifying, and exhausting reality of a sick child. One evening, after a particularly grueling week, he had poured himself a large scotch and made a grand pronouncement. "I love our son," he'd said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "But I am done. I am officially, completely and irrevocably done. One is enough. I cannot go through this again." I, who had secretly harbored a quiet desire for a second child, was disappointed but not surprised. I had long since come to understand the limits of my husband's character. So I had agreed. And Marcus, in a rare, decisive act of personal responsibility, had scheduled the procedure. He had been deeply, almost comically, secretive about it. He was a man whose ego was inextricably linked with his own sense of virility. The idea of his golf buddies or his business partners knowing he had undergone a vasectomy was, to him, a source of profound existential shame. He had made me swear I would never tell a soul. "This is between us, Lena," he had said, his voice a low, serious whisper. "No one. Not even Michael when he's older. It's no one's business." I had honored his request. The secret was kept. But I am and have always been a meticulous keeper of records. When the certified report from the urologist arrived in the mail a few weeks after the procedure, confirming its success, I did not throw it away. I filed it. I placed the single clinical document with its official letterhead, its date, its signature and its damning unequivocal conclusion, into a protective sleeve and locked it in my safe, alongside our passports, our birth certificates and the deed to our house. It was just another important family document, an artifact to be preserved. I had no idea that 20 years later, it would become the single most important document I possessed. Kayla, in her smug, triumphant confession, had made one fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. She had based her entire strategy on a single flawed premise, that Marcus was the father of her child. She had built her entire palace of lies on a foundation of sand. Her plan, as she had so cruelly laid it out, was perfect in its own twisted logic. She would get pregnant. She would tell Michael it was his. And she would tell me the truth, knowing that I would be trapped. If I told Michael the truth about the affair, she would deny it, and I would look like a jealous, vindictive monster trying to destroy my son's happy marriage. She would be the pregnant, grieving wife. I would be the cruel, unstable mother-in-law. He was right. In a battle of her word against mine, she would win. But she had no idea that I did not need to rely on my word. I had something better. I had a fact. A cold, hard, and medically certified fact. The baby she was carrying, the child she was planning to use as a pawn to secure her future, could not, under any circumstances, be my husband's. Which led to a second, even more devastating conclusion. Not only was she lying about Marcus being the father, but she was also lying to my son Michael. The baby was not his either. It belonged to some other, unknown man. She was not just having an affair with her father-in-law. She was having an affair with at least one other person as well. Her betrayal was not a simple, sordid triangle. It was a web of deceit so complex and so profound it was almost a work of art. As I stood there by the Christmas tree, accepting her congratulations on my impending grandmotherhood, I felt a kind of detached, clinical admiration for the sheer scale of her depravity. She was not just a narcissist. She was a sociopath. And she had no idea that the quiet, smiling doctor she was trying to destroy was the only person in the world who held the key to her diagnosis, and to her complete and utter destruction. With Kayla's poisoned whisper still echoing in my ear, I knew the evening had entered its final, critical phase. My own emotional response was no longer a factor. My only goal now was to navigate the rest of the party with a flawless performance of maternal and wifely bliss, to give no one, least of all Marcus or Kayla, any reason to suspect that the ground had shifted beneath their feet. I needed to maintain the illusion of the status quo until I was ready to shatter it on my own terms. I excused myself from my conversation with Eleanor and began to circulate through the room, the perfect, gracious hostess. I refilled glasses. I laughed at anecdotes. I inquired about children and grandchildren. Each social pleasantry was a small, deliberate act of defiance. Each smile was a carefully constructed mask. On the inside, my mind was a whirlwind of cold, clear, strategic thought. On the outside, I was the picture of serene, festive calm. I watched Marcus and Kayla from across the room. After her failed attempt to detonate my composure, Kayla had retreated to a corner, her smug confidence replaced by a look of sullen confusion. She was watching me, trying to decipher my reaction, trying to understand why her checkmate had not ended the game. Marcus, oblivious to the quiet drama that had just unfolded, was in his element. He was basking in the admiration of our guests, the benevolent king of his Christmas court. He caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He was pleased with the party. He was pleased with his life. He was a man standing on the edge of a cliff, admiring the view, with no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to give way. The most difficult part of the performance was interacting with my son. Michael, full of a happy holiday spirit, sought me out, pulling me into a conversation with one of his old college friends. "Mom, you remember Kevin, right?" he said, his arm draped lovingly around my shoulders. "Of course," I said, smiling warmly at the young man. "It's so good to see you, Kevin. How is your family?" As I engaged in the polite, easy chatter, I was acutely aware of Michael's physical presence, of his love, of his profound and tragic ignorance. My heart ached for the pain that was coming his way, a pain that I myself would have to be the instrument of delivering. But I knew with a doctor's certainty that a swift, clean surgical cut is always kinder than a slow, festering disease. I was not just planning to save myself, I was planning to save him, even if the cure was going to be excruciating. As the evening began to wind down and the guests began to depart, offering their thanks and their holiday wishes, Marcus gathered the remaining family, me, Michael, and Kayla, in the living room. "Before the night is officially over," he announced, raising his glass of brandy, "I'd like to make one final toast." He looked around at the three of us, his expression one of deep, patriarchal satisfaction. "To family," he said. "To the Davenports. We've had a wonderful year. And I have a feeling that the new year is going to be full of even more happy surprises." He looked directly at Kayla as he said the last words, a small, conspiratorial smile playing on his lips. She, in turn, darted a quick, triumphant glance at me. They believed they were sharing a secret that I was now a helpless, unwilling party to. They were toasting their own victory, their own cleverness. I raised my own glass. I met my husband's gaze and then my daughter-in-law's. I smiled my serene, enigmatic smile. To happy surprises, I echoed, my voice as smooth as velvet. I couldn't agree more. I have a feeling this will be a Christmas we will all remember for a very, very long time. My words, so full of a double meaning that only I could understand, seemed to satisfy them. They heard a promise of my compliance. They heard a surrender. They had no idea that what they were hearing was a prophecy. A prophecy of the reckoning that was coming not in the new year, but in less than 12 hours, under the bright festive lights of the Christmas tree. Christmas morning in the Davenport house had always been a ritual of quiet, luxurious tradition. We would gather in the grand, sun-drenched parlor, still in our silk pajamas and dressing gowns, and exchange gifts before the cook prepared a lavish brunch. It was usually my favorite day of the year, a rare moment of peaceful, familial intimacy. This year it was the staging ground for a surgical strike. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tensions. Michael, bless his innocent heart, was the only one who seemed genuinely relaxed, his face alight with a boyish holiday excitement. Marcus and Kayla, on the other hand, were vibrating with a kind of nervous, triumphant energy. They kept exchanging small secret smiles, their eyes shining with the knowledge of the happy surprise they believed they were about to bestow upon the family. They thought they were in control of the narrative, that the day would unfold according to their script. We went through the motions of the gift exchange. I gave Marcus a set of rare first-edition books by his favorite author. He gave me a diamond bracelet that was beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal, a gift chosen, I was sure, by Kayla. Michael gave me a beautiful framed architectural drawing of our house, a gift of such thoughtfulness and love it almost broke my heart. Kayla's gifts were all about performance. She gave Michael a ridiculously expensive watch, a symbol of the success she felt he should project. She gave Marcus a cashmere sweater in a shade of blue that brought out his eyes, a gift far too intimate for a daughter-in-law. Finally, the pile of presents under the tree had dwindled to nothing. The floor was a sea of discarded wrapping paper and ribbons. Marcus leaned back on the sofa, a look of deep satisfaction on his face. He was preparing, I knew, to make his grand announcement, to finally reveal the surprise of Kayla's pregnancy. But I was not going to give him the chance to control the stage. Well, that was wonderful, I said, my voice bright and clear, cutting through the quiet lull. But it seems we have one gift left. All eyes turned to me. I stood up and walked over to a small antique side table, where a single beautifully wrapped package had been sitting unnoticed all morning. It was a medium-sized box, wrapped in heavy cream-colored paper and tied with a wide gold satin ribbon. It was from Tiffany & Company, its iconic blue-green box hidden inside the wrapping, a detail I had arranged to add to the illusion. It looked important. It looked expensive. I picked it up and walked back towards the fireplace, where Kayla was sitting on a plush ottoman, looking like the queen of the castle. I'm afraid I forgot to put this one under the tree, I said, my voice a perfect blend of warmth and a slight grandmotherly absent-mindedness. This is a very special final gift. It's for you, Kayla. I held the box out to her. Her eyes widened, first with surprise and then with a dawning, greedy excitement. A special gift? From me. She could only interpret it in one way. This was it. This was my surrender. This was the peace offering, the bribe, the expensive piece of jewelry that would signify my acceptance of my new diminished role in the family. This was the first tribute payment to the new queen. She looked from the beautifully wrapped box to my face, her own expression a mixture of triumph and a kind of pitying contempt. She thought she had won so completely that I was now rewarding her for her victory. "Oh, Simone," she said, her voice dripping with a false, saccharine sweetness. "You really shouldn't have." "Nonsense," I replied, my smile never wavering. "It's Christmas. And after the wonderful news you shared with me last night, I felt it was the least I could do." I placed the gift in her lap. It was done. The bait was taken. The trap was set. And the entire unsuspecting family was now a captive audience for the final devastating reveal. The parlor was silent, the only sound the soft crackle of the fire in the grand marble fireplace. All eyes were on Kayla. She was the center of the universe, the star of the show, and she was savoring her moment. She held the beautifully wrapped gift in her lap, her fingers tracing the wide, gold satin ribbon. She looked up at me, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated victory. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had just successfully executed the most brilliant coup of her life. She had secured my husband, she was pregnant with his child, or so she believed, and she was about to be rewarded for her treachery with a lavish gift from the very woman she had just deposed. In her mind, the world was unfolding exactly as it should. "Well, I can't imagine what it could be," she said, her voice a theatrical purr. She was not just opening a gift, she was performing. Her audience was Michael, her loving, duped husband, and Marcus, her co-conspirator and lover. She was showing them both the proof of her new power, her ability to command tribute from the former queen. She began to unwrap the gift with a slow, deliberate relish. She untied the satin ribbon with a flourish, letting it fall to the floor. She carefully, almost sensually, peeled back the heavy cream-colored paper, revealing the iconic robin's egg blue of a Tiffany & Company box. A small, collective gasp went through the room. Michael looked impressed. Marcus looked smugly satisfied. This was a gift that befitted the new status of the woman he had chosen. Kayla lifted the lid of the box. Inside, nestled in the signature white satin lining, was not a necklace or a bracelet. It was a smaller velvet-lined jeweler's box. The kind that holds something truly special. Her smile widened. Her eyes glittered with a greedy, acquisitive light. She was imagining what lay inside. A diamond pendant? A pair of sapphire earrings? The possibilities were endless, and all of them were expensive. She lifted the smaller box from its satin bed. It felt heavy, substantial in her hands. She looked at me one last time, her eyes shining. "Simone," she breathed. "You are too generous." "I assure you, Kayla," I replied, my voice a quiet, level thing. "It is exactly what you deserve." My words, with their hidden double meaning, flew right over her head. She was too consumed with her own triumph to notice the cold, clinical edge in my voice. With a final, theatrical flourish, she pressed the small button on the front of the jeweler's box. The lid sprang open with a soft, expensive-sounding click. And she looked inside. The unwrapping was complete. The performance was over. And the reality of what I had just given her was about to land with the force of a physical blow. For a single solitary second, there was only a profound, confused silence. Kayla stared down into the open velvet box, her brain trying to process the information her eyes were sending it. The object nestled in the satin lining was not a piece of jewelry. It was not glittering. It was not a diamond. It was a simple, elegant, sterling silver picture frame. And inside the frame, behind a pane of clear, unforgiving glass, was not a photograph. It was a document. A single sheet of paper folded to fit, its text clinical, official, and stark. I watched her face as she read the words. I saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes give way to a dawning, horrified comprehension. I saw the color drain from her face, leaving behind a pale, waxy, and suddenly very ugly mask of disbelief. Her smug, triumphant smile collapsed, her mouth falling slightly agape. The document was, of course, the certified report from the urologist, dated 20 years prior. The letterhead of the prestigious medical clinic was at the top. The date was clearly visible. And the text, though small, was perfectly legible. It detailed the procedure, a vasectomy, performed on one Mr. Marcus Davenport. And it concluded with the cold, clinical, and absolutely unequivocal results of the post-operative analysis. Sperm count, 0. Motility, 0. Result, successful sterilization. The words were a death sentence to her entire, carefully constructed fantasy. The baby she was carrying, the one she was going to use as a weapon to destroy me and control my son, could not, under any circumstances, be Marcus's. The foundation of her entire plan, the central pillar of her grand deception, had just been revealed to be a biological impossibility. Her brain, which had been so full of triumphant strategic thought just moments before, seemed to short-circuit. The intricate web of lies she had been spinning for months, for years, had just been set on fire. And then she screamed. It was not a sound of surprise. It was not a sound of anger. It was a raw, guttural, and deeply primal sound of pure animalistic horror. It was the sound of a person who has just seen their entire world, their entire future, turn to ash in an instant. The sound ripped through the festive, peaceful atmosphere of the Christmas morning parlor, a sound of such profound and ugly despair that it seemed to suck all the air from the room. The scream went on and on, a single high-pitched, keening wail of a soul being flayed alive. She dropped the box as if it were on fire. It landed on the thick Persian rug with a soft, muffled thud. She scrambled back from it, her hands flying to her face, her eyes wide with a terror that was no longer theatrical. This was real. This was the raw, unfiltered agony of a master manipulator who has just been completely, utterly, and publicly outplayed. The scream shattered the morning's festive peace like a pane of glass. Michael, my son, was on his feet in an instant, his face a mask of alarm and concern. "Kayla? Honey, what is it? What's wrong?" He rushed to her side, kneeling beside the ottoman where she was now rocking back and forth, her hands covering her face, her body racked with a series of dry, hysterical sobs. Her scream had subsided into a low, desperate moaning. "What happened?" Michael asked, looking from his distraught wife to me, his eyes wide with confusion. I simply pointed to the velvet box lying on the floor. "Her gift," I said, my voice calm. "I think it surprised her." Michael, his brow furrowed with a deep, worried frown, picked up the box. He looked inside at the silver frame. He lifted it out, his movements gentle, still trying to make sense of the situation. He turned the frame over in his hands and he read the document. I watched my son's face as he processed the information. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The initial look of confusion gave way to a dawning, horrified disbelief. His eyes scanned the page, then scanned it again as if willing the words to change. I saw the moment the two separate and equally devastating betrayals landed on him. The first was the affair. The document proved, with a certainty that was beyond all doubt, that the baby his wife was carrying was not his father's. Which meant that his wife was lying. Which meant that the only reason she would have to lie about such a thing was if she were, in fact, having an affair with his father. The furtive glances, the secret smiles, all the small dissonant details he had subconsciously ignored for months, suddenly snapped into a clear, ugly, and undeniable picture. His wife and his father. The two people he trusted most in the world. The second betrayal was even more profound. If the baby was not his father's and his wife was pregnant, then the baby was not his either. His wife was not just cheating on him with his own father. She was pregnant with another man's child, a man he didn't even know, and she was planning to pass that child off as his. The dual impact of it, the sheer, unimaginable scale of the deceit, seemed to physically stun him. He just knelt there on the floor, the silver frame held limply in his hands, his face ashen. The love and happiness that had been shining in his eyes just minutes before was extinguished, replaced by a look of such profound and absolute devastation that it almost broke my own composure. He looked up, his eyes finding mine across the room. His gaze was full of a silent, agonizing question. He knew. I gave him a small, sad nod. Yes, I knew. And I am so sorry. He then turned his gaze to his father. Marcus had been watching the scene unfold from the comfort of his armchair, a smug, satisfied smirk on his face. He had seen Kayla's scream not as a sign of horror, but as a moment of high feminine drama, a reaction to the shock of her pregnancy being so cleverly revealed. He believed, in his profound narcissistic blindness, that this was all still part of his grand romantic narrative. He believed he was still in control. He had no idea what was in the frame. Now, as he saw the look on his son's face, a look of such pure, undiluted loathing, the smug satisfaction began to curdle into a dawning, uneasy confusion. "Michael?" he said, his voice hesitant. "What is it, son? What's going on?" Michael did not speak. He simply stood up, his movements stiff, robotic, and walked over to his father. He held out the silver frame. "You should read this," he said, his voice a dead, hollow thing. Marcus took the frame, a frown of annoyance on his face. He was still trying to process the shift in the room's atmosphere, the sudden, inexplicable turn of events. He looked down at the document. I watched him read. I watched as his brain, clouded with arrogance and self-delusion, processed the clinical black and white text. I saw the moment of recognition. I saw the blood drain from his face. I saw his eyes widen, not with the shock of a man being discovered, but with the pure, primal terror of a man who has just realized he has walked into a perfectly laid trap. The vasectomy. The secret he had buried for 20 years. The secret he had likely forgotten himself had just been resurrected. And it had been resurrected in the most public, most damning and most humiliating way imaginable. His entire world imploded in that single silent moment. He was not the virile, powerful patriarch, bestowing his seed upon a younger, more fertile vessel. He was a sterile, aging fool who had been played. He had been played by his mistress, who was clearly pregnant with another man's child. And he had been played with a terrifying surgical precision by the wife he had so arrogantly underestimated. He looked up from the frame, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. He looked at Kayla, who was now sobbing hysterically, a mess of ruined makeup and shattered lies. He looked at his son, whose face was a mask of cold, unforgiving contempt. And finally he looked at me. He saw me sitting calmly in my armchair watching him, my expression one of quiet, clinical observation. And in my eyes he finally saw the truth. He saw the intelligence he had always dismissed, the strength he had mistaken for passivity, the quiet, meticulous planning of a woman who had been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. He had no defense. There were no words. There were no excuses. The evidence was absolute and it was irrefutable. He was exposed completely and totally, in front of the one person whose opinion still mattered to him. His son. He was not just an adulterer. He was a liar, a coward, and a fool. He made a small choking sound, a noise of pure animalistic despair. He dropped the frame onto the floor. He put his head in his hands, his body slumping forward in his chair, a man utterly and completely defeated. The king had been deposed. And his collapse was not a grand, tragic downfall. It was a pathetic, whimpering and deeply undignified end. The aftermath was a tableau of ruin. My son Michael stood like a statue, his face a mask of stone, the shock having given way to a deep, cold and righteous anger. My husband Marcus remained slumped in his chair, a broken, pathetic figure, stripped of all his bluster and charm. Anne Kayla, my daughter-in-law, was a mess of hysterical, incoherent sobs, her beautiful Christmas dress now looking like a cheap costume on a disgraced actress. I stood up. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for action had begun. I walked past the wreckage of my husband and my daughter-in-law, my focus entirely on the one person in the room who was a true victim, the one person who mattered. I went to my son. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. He flinched, his body rigid with a pain so profound it was almost a physical thing. "Michael," I said softly. "Let's go." He looked at me, his eyes full of a grief so vast it was like looking into an abyss. He gave a single sharp nod. I led him out of the parlor, out of the room filled with the stench of betrayal and deceit. We walked through the grand foyer, past the glittering, mocking Christmas tree, and out the front door into the cool, clean air of Christmas morning. We did not look back. We spent the rest of the day at my private office, a quiet, serene space that had always been my sanctuary. I did not practice psychology on my son. I was simply his mother. I made him tea. I sat with him in the quiet as he stared out the window, processing the unimaginable. And when he was ready to talk, I listened. I listened as he raged. I listened as he grieved. I listened as he tried to make sense of the fact that the two people he loved most had conspired to betray him in the most profound way possible. The days that followed were a quiet, efficient dismantling of my old life. Simone, my lawyer, handled everything. Divorce papers were formally served on Marcus. Kayla, faced with the irrefutable evidence of her multiple infidelities, was forced to agree to a swift and quiet annulment of her marriage to Michael. She left the city within a week. A disgraced woman with no husband, no father-in-law, and a baby whose paternity was now a source of public speculation. Marcus, a man with no income, no home and no family, was forced to accept the minimal court-mandated divorce settlement I offered. He was a ghost in his own life, a man whose entire identity had been built on a foundation of my success, a foundation I had just, with a single decisive move, withdrawn. My life, however, was not one of dismantling but of rebuilding. My primary focus was on Michael. I helped him navigate the grief, the anger, the humiliation. I gave him the space to heal and the unwavering, unconditional love that was the one true thing in his life. He was strong. He was resilient. And in time I knew he would be okay. One afternoon a few months later, he and I were sitting in the garden of my Buckhead home. The spring flowers were beginning to bloom, a riot of color and new life. I don't know how you did it, Mom, he said, his voice quiet, full of a new adult respect. How you stayed so calm, how you knew what to do. I smiled, a real genuine smile. I'm a doctor, honey, I said. My job is to diagnose the sickness and then, if I can, to provide the cure. Our family was sick. Very sick. And the only cure was a radical and rather painful surgery. He nodded, understanding. I had removed the cancers from my life. I had saved my son. And I had, in the process, saved myself. I looked out at the blooming garden, at the promise of a new season, and I wrote a new diagnosis for my own future. Prognosis, excellent.